Bill Taranto, who is the president of the Merck Global Health Innovation Fund, the largest digital health fund in the world and one of the first out there to get into the business, but also the genius behind Livongo and Preventus and many other, now Transcarent, which we'll hear from Glenn Tillman later on today as well. And we also have the data science leader from Medidata, the world's largest clinical trial software company, Chrysanthi Dori. And she, again, is a life science leader in the ecosystem with 30 years of experience. And she is the newest member of the Breakthrough Alliance board. The Breakthrough Alliance, if you remember, is a consortium of major healthcare system stakeholders trying to share evidence-based research coming out of the HITLAB and make decisions on investing and purchasing healthcare systems and new digital health technologies based upon evidence-driven, hypothesis-driven work coming out of the lab and other places. And again, Chrysanthi is the newest member of the Breakthrough Alliance board. Very excited to have her. And Bill Taranto is going to interview her as our first session today. So you all can get to know Chrysanthi better, and certainly the good work that Medidata, the world's largest clinical trials software provider, is doing out of New York City on 250 Hudson Street. So with that, I am honored to hand over the virtual mic to Bill Taranto and Chrysanthi Dori. Bill, Chrysanthi, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Stan. I appreciate it very much. I'm very excited today to talk to Chrysanthi, who's Vice President of Technical Services at Medidata Systems. Welcome, Chrysanthi. So we have a pretty broad audience, everything from entrepreneurs to business leaders to students. A lot of them may not know who you are, so I always like to just start with, your career journey. Can you kind of walk the audience through, how'd you start your career? How'd you end up, where you are today as Vice President at Medidata Systems?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Okay. Great to be here. I would like to talk a little bit, yes, about how my career progressed throughout the time. I worked for several industries in the past. I start from financial, telecommunications. I moved to network security and radio computing, cybersecurity, and then I moved to pharmaceutical, and I landed now in Medidata solutions. My focus were always compliance, regulatory, safety, achieving operational efficiencies, but my passion is around innovation and new technologies that allowed me actually to work on frameworks that involved acceleration and optimization of clinical trials for patients with various diseases. And I worked also as a head of direct subject data acquisition in the past on the sponsor side for data science and analytics, around data acquisition and integration from patient-reported outcome and clinical outcome assessments, wearables, and electronic health records, in order to be able to ensure the quality of conclusions and recommendations. And I focus a lot in the area of heart failure. Now, my passion in my career, where I stand now, it's health and wellness. We know that many people around the world, they lack access to basic healthcare services, and they suffer from preventable illnesses and diseases. And at Medidata, we always say, let's focus to solve the impossible. And what this means, work hard on digital innovation, healthcare access and affordability, be able to provide clinical trials, and be able to create diversity and non-bias utilizing DCTs and other technologies.
Okay, fantastic. So really interesting career journey. So we're going to get into what Medidata does around clinical trials and file service. But first, let's talk about your job as VP Technical Services. Can you explain to the audience what you do on a daily basis and what your job entails at Medidata?
Yes, my job is very interesting and never boring at Medidata. I lead a global engineering team, which is called Technical Services Team. And what this team is responsible about the architecture, the design, the software development, and the quality control of all the customizations around Medidata products. And lately, we are creating a lot of offerings on our own creating scalable, market differentiating service offerings, which actually enable all our customers to maximize the Medidata platform globally. And when we are talking about customers, we mean major enterprise customers like the Amgens, the AstraZenecas of the world, the BMS, then mid-sized partners and mid-sized companies like the Modernas of the world, and then partners, the EMEA, etc.
Okay, let's talk clinical trials more specifically. So how is Medidata improving clinical trials, and how do you differentiate yourself and Medidata from other types of companies that are in a clinical trial space?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking this. I feel that Medidata is playing a very important role in improving clinical trials, because what we do is we leverage technology to make the clinical trial process more efficient, more effective, and patient-centric. So where we focus is we try to streamline the clinical trial processes, and we do that by providing a centralized platform where we can manage the data from different modalities, we track patient enrollment, and we monitor study progress. We also enable remote monitoring solutions, which means we allow clinical trial staff to be able to monitor patient data and study progress, and that is remotely, so that we can reduce the need for in-person visits and make clinical trials more accessible to patients. The other one that we strive actually at Medidata is improve data quality. We work on providing remote tools for data collection, data engineering, cleaning, analysis, where we can help improve the quality and accuracy of clinical trial data. This means lineage, integrity, profiling, common database models, etc. We also work on enhancing patient engagement. We have patient-facing solutions that enable patients to participate in clinical trials more easily with user-friendly interfaces and remote monitoring tools, as we discussed. And the last that is a very big for Medidata is support regulatory compliance. Because we need to help our clinical trial sponsors to comply with all the regulatory requirements by providing audit trails, data security measures, etc.
So another follow-up question on the clinical trial space. What do you see some of the challenges and opportunities as we bring more technology into the clinical trial space as we move forward in the future, sort of where clinical trials are going?
That's a very good question. The clinical trial space actually faces several challenges, but there are also many opportunities in order to improve the clinical trial process and make it more patient-centric, efficient, and effective. I think some of the challenges that the industry is facing is always patient recruitment and retention, especially in the area of orphan diseases. One of the biggest challenges in clinical trials is find and retain participants, and we know the costs associated with it. We need to recruit the right patients and keep them engaged throughout the trial. Some of the solutions we have within Medidata, we talk about Acon AI, where we have the capability for orphan diseases to identify sites that they can recruit patients. And we also have what we call synthetic controls. So we enable our sponsors not to have different treatment groups for placebos, but concentrate on finding the right patients. Then there is also the challenge of data quality and integrity, because we know now that the data are acquired from different modalities. We talk a lot about all these AI technologies. One of the important aspects is how do we ensure quality and integrity on clinical trials so that our customers can obtain regulatory approval, and of course ensure patient safety. Because the complexity of the data and the collection of the data comes from multiple sources. The other is cost and time constraints. Clinical trials can be very expensive and time consuming, and there is a lot of competition now. Many studies are failing to meet the enrollment targets or timelines. So reducing the cost and time required for clinical trials is a key priority. and as I mentioned, regulatory compliance, because clinical trials are subject to strict regulatory requirements and standards. Now, in terms of the opportunities in the space, based on what we discuss as challenges, it is the use of digital and decentralized trial technologies, which is an opportunity actually to improve the efficiency and accessibility of clinical trials, talking about removing bias and providing diversity. We provide the trials to the patients through telehealth, through ePro-ECOA questionnaires, through e-consent, and all of that. Also, real-world data, the collection of electronic health records, data that are coming, objective data, as we call them, coming from medically validated devices and other sources. They can provide real valuable insights into patient outcomes, and we can help optimize clinical trial design. We can also work to try to develop proxies for predicting outcomes and progression of diseases. And that helps us a lot with artificial intelligence and machine learning for automating data analysis, remote reconciliation tools that allow us to predict patient outcomes and also provide outliers and reconciliation issues ahead of the time, so we can allow our sponsor to be able to do the lock, the database lock, without protocol deviations on time and submit to the FDA. And the last opportunity is collaboration and partnerships within the clinical trial ecosystem, which means research, industry, patients, and regulators.
Okay. We have time for one last question. I always, as chairman of the HITLAB, I always like to ask a HITLAB question. So one is just, what is your connection to the HITLAB? And then how do you see the HITLAB itself advancing digital health?
That's a great question. I'm very passionate actually about the work that HITLAB is doing. In the past, I collaborated with Stan Kanowski's team. We've done clinical trials together where we had several digital components, mobile apps, and we had medically validated devices analyzing the data that are coming from different sources in order to be able to create proxies. We also had a salon together with payers where we were trying to figure out the value of medically validated data that are coming in the course of clinical trials and how the payer industry looked at it. I mean, HITLAB's focus is mostly on collaboration, innovation, research, education, and advocacy. And what I like from them is they always promote collaboration, which means collaboration between all the different stakeholders, healthcare providers, researchers, industry partners, technology companies. HITLAB also develops and tests digital health technologies, which advances the research in that area, which includes mobile apps, as I mentioned, wearables, telehealth solutions. They provide education and training, and they're advocates for policy change to promote the adoption and integration of health technologies into the healthcare ecosystem. So I'm very excited to be a member of the board.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Chrysanthi. And Stan, I will turn it back over to you.
Terrific, Bill, and thank you again, Chrysanthi. Welcome to the board.